Everyone, and welcome to the June 14 work session of the Ann Arbor City Council, where we will be regaled with respect to an update on development of city-owned parcels as affordable housing and the Smart City Strategic Plan. Ms. Hall, you have the con.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. I want to introduce my panel of co-workers who are here to do the presentation with me. We have Maura Thompson with the DDA. We have Forrest Yang with the AAATA. Alex Huff and Michael Johnson are here with the Smith Group, and we may be joined by either Derek Delacour or Brett Leonard. And the reason we have sort of a wide spectrum of people participating is that this is really showcasing the collaboration that we're doing with other public entities to make sure that we are addressing each of our various public goals and the needs in the community around transportation, people-friendly streets, planning, and sustainability, as well as affordable housing. Oh, there's Derek. And we can go ahead and if I'm talking about an update on where we're at with 350 South 5th, and then we'll go into a discussion of the most recent 4 community engagement sites on Catherine, Main Street, 721 North Main, 353 South Main, as well as Ashley Street. Okay, go ahead. And I'm just going to give a refresher background, mostly for the public who may be watching. Our goal is, from an affordable housing perspective, to ensure that as many people as possible are able to access affordable housing, whether that's rental or homeownership or co-op. And the definition that we generally use in our area is that if you're spending more than 30% of your gross household income on housing, then it's considered too expensive for what the goal is. And there's actually sort of a new definition of affordable housing that takes into consideration transportation. So if you're spending more than 45% of your gross household income on both housing and transportation, then that's considered a cost burden as well, which is what happens when you have a community like Ann Arbor that gets increasingly expensive, and then people move farther and farther away. And so your transportation costs increase as you're finding more affordable housing. And that's why we look at sort of both of them combined. Go ahead. This year, the median family income as published by HUD increased by a little over $5,000 over last year, which is a very significant jump. So the current median family income for 2021 is $106,600, which means half are below, half are above that in the community. And you've probably seen this chart many times, updated for this year. What happens is HUD places that median income for the entire community into a household of 4 at median. And then every other position on this chart is really a formula. And so it's just if you go a lower household size or a higher household size or a higher income or a low income, it's just a formula that HUD's used to determine which households are eligible for which kinds of funding. And then the city also uses the same information for its own programs. For example, affordable housing that's required through a brownfield or a PUD or any kind of zoning that a developer provides affordable housing. And then if you translate that and you take that income and you translate it into what is that affordable housing cost based on your gross income, we just pulled 60% of area median income because that is the goal with City Council, to try to increase the number of affordable units at 60% area median income or less. It's not strictly that exact number, it's that number or anything less than that for these household sizes. So if you take that information and you translate it into the maximum affordable monthly housing costs, you can see that right here, which is really actually just slightly below the average apartment cost in the community right now. So as incomes increase really quickly, the pool of eligibility increases, but the number of really low income households is decreasing because there's not enough affordable housing. And so when we actually do the projects that we're going to talk about, we're not necessarily specifically targeting exactly 60% of area median income. We want to target lower income households as well with lower housing costs, but this is generally the max of what our goal is. So the impact on the community with more people not being able to live in the community, who work in the community, is about 84,000 people commute into the city for work. This is pre-COVID numbers. So they live outside the city, commute inside the city. About 24,000 live in the city and also work in the city, and a little over 20,000 live in the city and commute outside outside of the city for their jobs, which has a big impact, not just on the people who are having to commute and impact on their life and their family situation. It has also a big impact on the city's infrastructure, the roads, parking, all of those things, police, fire, et cetera, for people who are coming into the city. So about 2015, a study was commissioned to look at housing and economic stability in various communities throughout the county. And what the report recommended was that the city of Ann Arbor should try to meet a goal of having about 140 affordable housing units built, acquired, permanently restricted for the next 20 years for 60% AMI households. And that equals about 2,800 starting in 2015. And with the recent millage that was passed, the Affordable Housing Millage Proposition C in November, this is a guesstimate depending on the combination of acquisition versus new construction and depending on how the market fluctuates. But we believe that would be enough funding over the next 20 years, starting in 2021, to add at least 1,500 units of affordable housing. And this happens to coincide with the work we were already doing in looking at redeveloping city-owned sites that are what we call underutilized. In other words, if they're a surface parking lot, for example, or a old public works area that's no longer being fully utilized by the city, could we build something more functional and do affordable housing on those sites? And so that leads us into our discussion of the first site that we want to talk about is 350 South Fifth, which is what we call the former Y lot. And I am going to turn this over to Michael, I'm assuming, to walk us through where we're at in the process. And we really want to focus on and talk about why the design is the way it is and why our collaboration with the DDA as well as the AAATA and the development department has really had an impact on how we're designing the building to make it something that is meeting many different public needs, from the people-friendly streets to transit, as I said before, sustainability, et cetera. And I will turn it over to Michael.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. Michael Johnson with Smith Group, based here in Ann Arbor. And yeah, excited to share with you the update on our work at 350 South Fifth. Just for kind of a context perspective, this is a continuation of some of the public engagement work that we started pre-COVID, looking at both this lot and the 415 West Washington site. And so, using that work really as a starting point for the work that we continued as it relates to the pre-entitlement work. As of Thursday, the 10th, so 4 days ago, we just had a public engagement session for the residents closest to the lot. That was kind of the first step in kicking off a PUD process that we hope to have submitted in July. So this is an opportunity to present to you kind of the in progress piece here, of course, built on the public engagement that started 18 or so months ago. And this was the preferred option that the 350 plus both residents and residents and beyond participated in. We had 4 public 4-hour work sessions at various points throughout the community, and then had online surveys as well, where we really looked at different forms of the buildings, and then what we call different trade-offs and or kind of success metrics, as you can see measured down the front. This preferred option, as measured by the public, was within zoning, the D1 zoning, up to 900% floor area ratio, and it was targeting 418 total units, 31% of which would have been affordable. So about 130 of those at affordable. And you'll see how this kind of concept has a lot of similarities, but has continued to evolve as we've continued to work with the DDA and the AAATA and the community over the last several months. And so what we looked at for that first engagement exercise was really focusing on, per the public, how do we make sure we have an option for this site that maximizes affordable housing, but also improves the operations of the Blake Transit Center. The other criteria that we've uncovered over the last several months include the continued work with the utility easements and the DT easement on this site, the loading requirements that are going to be required to make sure all this happens at grade and not below grade, considerations for what the expansion of the operations for bus could be as it relates to on-street transit and dedicated bus lanes, feasibility for while this site and the option that we're not requiring parking or encouraging parking, it does look for the options should a developer partner consider that, and that's one of the considerations that we've looked at. In addition to then how all of this layers up vertically with the vertical circulation and the feasibility of the project. But I would like, and Forrest, as you take a sip of water, maybe at this point to let Forrest from the AAATA just chime in here a little bit to help the group continue to understand what this means for the AAATA and the Blake Transit Center and how we've continued to work with them. So Forrest, if you have anything else to add.
Good. Thanks, Michael. Actually, I probably, some of you may be familiar with the Blake Transit Center. It was built, I think at a very limited capacity. So even right now, we have only 5 buses parked off-street terminal, within the Blake Transit Center. And there are about 10 buses parked along 4th Avenue and 5th, which is not, desirable from the rider's perspective. As you may know, this site development will displace 4 or 5 buses from 4th Avenue and the 5th. So we're already running at the capacity. So I really appreciate the opportunity of working with the Housing Commission, DDA, and the city, planning and the transportation department. So we work together and try to solve the problem with some, consideration for transit needs, housing needs, other needs. For now, I think we're, with the 4th Avenue design, pedestrians every day, on a typical day, I would say we have about 4,000 or 5,000 people use the bus Blake Transit Center. That's a lot of people walking around, crossing the street, transfer between buses. So there are also, safety concerns along those 2 streets at the terminal area. But anyway, so in order to address those issues, I think this is a great opportunity. I think it's a partnership opportunity for us to add some capacity to address some pedestrian movement issues, traffic, on-site traffic issues, and then provide a more transit-friendly or pedestrian-friendly environment around the existing Blake Transit Center. But I really appreciate this opportunity. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Forrest. This also has been in conjunction, so some of the work that Forrest referenced and that several of you are familiar with the work that Maura and her team at the DDA have been leading as it relates to people-friendly streets and specifically 4th Avenue. So at this point, I'd like Maura, if she's on, to perhaps chime in and kind of describe a little bit about the context as Forrest alluded to on 4th Avenue.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. Maura Thompson here with the Downtown Development Authority. So just a little bit of background. The DDA has been involved in this project for the last, I guess it's been 2 years. We funded the pre-entitlement and the community engagement process. And now we're prioritizing the work around 350 South 5th in the next round of people-friendly streets projects. So I know a lot of you are familiar with those projects. Most of the DDA's projects over the last several years have fallen under this initiative. And the goals of these projects are value-driven, with an emphasis on equity, affordability, and resiliency, which also align with key city initiatives of achieving Vision Zero by 2025, increasing the stock of affordable housing, and reaching carbon neutrality by 2030. These values are the cornerstone of all the DDA projects, and as Jennifer and Forrest and Michael have alluded to, 350 South 5th is just a great example of how a collaborative approach helps us to reach these collective community goals and maximize the public benefit that can be achieved in a project. So the DDA is just really excited to be working alongside the Housing Commission, the city, and the AAATA on this project. Our role, as I think Forrest alluded to, on this site will be streetscape and transit improvements along 4th Ave between William and Liberty. So in March, we held public engagement sessions to gather input from the community on a number of projects, including this one. And we heard very clearly a desire to see transit and pedestrians prioritized on this block of 4th. And this feedback was consistent with the priorities identified in the discussions that we had with the Housing Commission, AAATA, and the city. Michael, can you go to the next slide? So the scope of our work will include some utility work to support the Housing Commission's project, sidewalk widening to accommodate, as Forrest mentioned, the large volume of pedestrian activity that already exists on that block and that we anticipate, of course, is only going to increase once we have residents on site. We'll also be installing some raised mid-block crosswalks to slow down cars and improve safety. There'll be an expanded area on the block for transit use to increase the efficiency of operations at Blake. And we'll be doing some other streetscape improvements like trees and lights and things that you see there in the rendering. The timing of this project for us will be determined by the Housing Commission. Other than the utility work, we anticipate the majority of the work that we'll be doing will take place once the Housing Commission is completing their construction.
If I could add to that, thanks, Maura. When Maura's talking about utility work, it may seem like, oh, what are you putting some lights in? No, we're not talking about putting in lights. We're talking about very significant costs associated with underground utilities, water, sewer, stormwater, and the like. And so that would happen first, and then we'd have a phased construction project, and then the surface work on the street side comes after that, as far as like staging of the process. And also I wanted to mention that when you add a building to a site, and of course, you know, we have to deal with this, and City Council and the mayor have to deal with this in planning and development anytime a building is built in a downtown area where there's lots of other uses nearby. But putting it right next to a transit center where there's lots of buses has its own special challenges, that being a public entity as the owner, and the transit center, you know, being also publicly owned, and the DDA as well, it's really given us, it's taking time, but it's giving us the opportunity to like figure out everybody's needs and figure that out first while we're going through the site plan approval process, which is a very different process than, you know, doing an RFP for a developer to put a plan together and offer a price for a site. So I especially really appreciate City Council giving this direction to us and allowing us to like work through all of these issues, because it's going to make it a much, much better project.
Thanks, Jennifer, and thanks, Maura and Forrest. And I'll just underscore some of what's been said as a consultant and urban designer that has the opportunity to work all across the country and also a resident of Ann Arbor. I've just been extremely proud to see the collaboration that's taken place to get us to this point, and look forward to your feedback as we show you some of the progress here. So this, I think Maura and Forrest set the kind of context pretty well, and I think what we've then spent a lot of time and effort getting right with Jennifer and Maura and Forrest and Derek and Brett and the team is making sure that this ground plane works, and that we can feasibly get the number of affordable units that we need on the site, in addition to continuing to serve the expansion of the Blake Transit Center while functionally serving the building, and still continuing to provide an active William Street and bikeway and William Street front. So what you're looking at here is a kind of plan view that is anticipated to be part of the PUD submittal, and we're continuing to kind of tweak to get right, emphasizing 2 phases of a building, primarily for financial and grant kind of reasons, that this does allow for the P1 or the kind of leftmost side of this building to be considered as an all affordable project, which would allow it to receive potentially 9% LIHTC tax credit deal, and kind of puts it in that bracket, and then allowing the P2 version to be a more traditional 4% LIHTC deal, for those of you that heard Jennifer talk at length about those, and you can ask questions afterwards. But that then sets us up for the opportunity to have lobby space and active space kind of fronting on William Street, with then the service and trash space behind, all kind of allowing for this happen at grade, because of the complexities that would require that to happen below grade. And so you saw the kind of view of where we started from the engagement process, and you can see it in this view intentionally, kind of not architecturally articulated, right? We're talking about the baseline for a PUD plan here. So you can see the effort given to making sure that what gets approved through the PUD activates William Street and builds to the street line, as we've been said, and then allows for the building above to be set back accordingly. So this is a view looking at William Street down towards the west. A zoom in view looking west on William Street, emphasizing then some of the thought and care that's been put in to ensure that this streetscape can be active as we're talking about adjacent to the William Street bikeway. And then a reverse view looking east on William Street, that shows both the activation of the street and the kind of general scale and massing of the vertical circulation and tower above that would be permitted through the PUD. These are now 2 then aerial views that emphasize this. So looking at the corner from William and 5th, looking down towards, and you can see the 2 separate kind of phased opportunities just for scale. And one of the kind of changes or asks from here in the PUD is some additional height beyond the D1. And so the building on the left is shown as a 20-story building, up to 275 feet. The building on the building on the right, the building on the left is a 14-story building, which would be an all affordable building. And then you can see how it's being kind of this kind of building then could be contemplated to still set back off of Blake to allow for that double-sided Blake Transit Center and the efficiencies, and then of course the service of the building behind. Just
can I add something? Sorry,
please,
Michael?
Jennifer, go ahead.
So if you looked at and go back and look at which we're not going to go back that far, but if you look at the first slide that we showed of the building, from the original community engagement, and you look at the current building design, really the biggest driver of the change was that we originally thought we could have a shared alleyway with the buses that are coming in and out. And after many, many conversations, we realized that that was really not a great idea. There'd be way too much potential for conflict and safety issues. And so it forced us to go from a 30-foot sort of alleyway to a 45-foot alleyway that was separate from each other. And that forced changes to every other part of the building, which then I can't tell you anything about that, but Michael can.
Yep. Yeah, thanks, Jennifer, and happy to go into some detail now or answer questions as we kind of get into the next slides. But Jennifer's exactly right. Significant driver from a setback perspective, and then making sure that the vertical circulation in the building could still work efficiently. But this is a solution that works, and we think is still in line with what we've heard from the public to date. So the last slide we have two more here on this, and then I think, Jennifer, I'll defer to you, but I think the preference is to pause and take questions on this one before we go into the other 4 sites. So here is a summary of the numbers that we're targeting in this current version. You can see what we've been able to do is, while reducing maybe the total number of units from 418 to 370 in this current option, we have increased or are targeting to increase the number of affordable units. So 40% affordable throughout the project, 145 total, and that's achieved through 100% of all affordable building in the P1 wing that's shown, and then a 20% affordable in the P2. So just a quick update on process and schedule, and then we'll open it up for questions on this site. We did a design review board meeting late last year into kind of early this year. And then we, as I alluded to, just hosted a citizen participation meeting. I think that says June 14th. It was actually on June 10th. And we're targeting submitting the application for the PUD on behalf of the Ann Arbor Housing Commission in July, so that we can go to Planning Commission in August and or September, and then hope to see you back here at Council in October and November.
And the last thing I would like to add before we open it up for discussion is, in thinking about how we're going to be moving forward, the idea is to get the site plan approved, the zoning approved, and then simultaneously we're working on our request for qualification to select a development partner, but we won't actually go through that process until after we've gone through the site plan and zoning with the city and have that firmed up. And the idea is for phase 1, the Housing Commission would be the owner property manager, and it's to be determined how phase 2 would end up shaking out, but it likely would be, we're looking for a developer not just to oversee the development process, oversee the construction, but also would be likely the condo the site and have them as the owner manager of the phase 2, which would be more of a market rate mixed with affordable, whereas phase 1 would be an all affordable project. And it really depends on who we select as our qualified developer that we want to partner with. It could be an all senior project. It might be more of a market rate. It could be condo and rental. Like that part of it is to be determined still. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions about this particular site.
Councilor Briggs. Councilor Briggs, I can't hear you.
Hear me now?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So thanks for the great presentation. I'm glad to see how this is developing. A few questions. Could you explain a little bit more why this is being kind of envisioned as P1 being the kind of primarily solely affordable wing, and then P2 being market rate with a few affordable units? I know that one of the concerns that Planning Commission has had in the past is sort of the idea that you you have one building, but kind of it's two lobbies. Folks in our community are really divided. So maybe if you could provide a little bit more information on that and why this approach is being taken. And then also, has any consideration been given to making this an all electric site?
That's easy. I'll take the second question first. It's easy, yes. And the first question, when it comes to both financing of affordable projects as well as managing projects, there's a lot of things you have to take into consideration. On the financial side, you've probably all heard me talk about the single biggest source is low-income housing tax credits. There's not like, a big pot of HUD funds. I mean, there might be now with all the stimulus money, but typically there's not a big pot of federal funds for doing development projects. And so the biggest source is low-income housing tax credits. They have very specific rules about what makes, I wouldn't even say rules, but what makes your project competitive, the types of features that you have in it, which includes, green and sustainability features, but also includes maximizing the affordable units at that site. But it also has caps. It has development cost caps. And so it's not an unlimited per site unlimited amount of funding. You always end up with a cap on it. And so when you're looking at different sites, typically you don't see we say all affordable, it would be most likely be a mixture of 30% of median income, 40, 50, 60%, and maybe some 80% because tax credits goes up to 80% now. You can do a average of 60%. But that is a project that works from a financial perspective and is likely to be no more than 60 to like 90 units, usually somewhere in there. And then the rest has to be completely subsidized. And so with the affordable housing millage, and other sources of funds that we'll apply to, we can actually make this a bigger project than we normally would at other sites that we otherwise would not be able to do. Even, I think what we have right now is like 130 on that side. Like we would definitely not be able to do 130 units in one site without having the affordable housing millage to help support that. And when we looked at best practices for income mixing, there's this ideal that you want to have, all kinds of incomes work happily living together in the same space with, everybody getting along and everything works out. The challenges with income mixing, with the people who have studied it and looked at mixed income projects, the way that it works the best is if you have incomes that are closer together on the spectrum. So if you want to include permanent supportive housing, which we would like to do here, because this is a site that used to have SROs that were managed by the Y, 100 SRO units that were extremely affordable. So if you want to include people who can afford 30% AMI or less type rents, then the income mix that works best with that are incomes that are closer to that. So you would do like a 30, 40, 50, 60, up to an 80% AMI. That works well, but mixing in households at 30% of AMI, permanent supportive housing with market rate housing, charging what our downtown rents are, our downtown condos are, those projects tend to not be successful. Part of the difficulty, I know this is a very long answer, but this is actually a very important question to ask, because it's a challenge for, it's a market challenge for property managers and owners who have high cost housing, whatever type it is, to integrate lower income housing into their marketplace. One, you have the financial challenge, and so you have to have subsidies. So let's say you're able to deal with that. Let's throw as much millage money as we want, and we deal with that part of it. Then the challenge becomes issues of screening tenants in, screening tenants out, screening tenants for criminal background, for past histories of eviction, screening tenants by their income capacity. And so when there's just a market pressure for that to be screened out. And it also means that if somebody does get in who may have some lease violations, the reaction is really to evict them rather than do the kind of work that we do. And we partner with our local nonprofits when we have service providers. Our goal is always no evictions as much as we can possibly do that. And so we have service providers that work with folks on whatever the issue is, whether it's, noise or fighting with neighbors or not paying your rent. And so if you have, sometimes we have tenants who, for whatever reason, they might pull the fire alarm in the middle of the night. You can only tolerate that so many times as a property manager with $3,000 a month rents before you're like the first time that happens, that person's evicted. And so the reason we're looking at phase one as all affordable and not the entire site as all affordable is both what can we financially feasibly do as much affordable as possible? And that means putting it into the same building. We could not do a phase two and then our whole entire site would be affordable. And so really it's the bonus piece of the site that it's big enough to do this phase two. We don't see it being feasible to do a second tower like that, but we could do a higher market rate mixed in with sort of that more closer to that 60% AMI, 50% AMI level and see if we can make something like that work. One way we could work with a phase two, which I would love if we could make this happen, is if it ends up being seniors, because senior housing developers that are focused on affordability tend to be able to secure different kinds of funding that makes that project more feasible and have lower income households. Does that answer the spectrum of your questions? And I guess the second piece of that is well, what about the property management? I feel very comfortable managing the Housing Commission managing an affordable housing project, 80%, even up to 100% AMI. We don't have the background. We have never done market rate affordable mixed housing, which is again extremely difficult. It's not something that we have the skills to do or have the ability to raise that kind of capital to pay for the market rate side of things.
Great, thank you. And the second part was just the all electric.
Yes. Yep. Michael, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I can jump in there real quickly, and I'll be super brief. The intent here is that yes, this is a net zero ready building, so it should be a fully electrified building that is carbon neutral as soon as our grid catches up. So the intent that we're talking about now is to write that piece into the RFP, and then look for innovations from our developer partners to start to rank how that as a scoring criteria. The other piece, I'll just chime in real quick on the design side, is that, while shown as two wings and two phases, I think one thing that this council can focus on moving forward is, and making sure we hold the design team to that the quality of both sides of those buildings is exactly the same, and that the layout of those buildings is designed in such a way that it's not exclusive, but inclusive. And so I think that's a really good point to bring up.
Good. Councilmember Amlawi, then Song, then perhaps call it a day and move on to our next building.
Thank you, and thanks for the presentation here tonight. I do have quite a few questions. Hopefully we can get through them all. The first one, since I only have one for the DDA, is that how will they be financing the contributions to this development, and do they know what the costs will be and the improvements they plan to make? So what would the total cost be, and how will that be? Are they planning to bond it?
No, so last year, the DDA board approved $10 million for our next round of people-friendly streets projects. $3 million of that was committed to State Street, and $7 million was budgeted for 4 additional streets that we would determine after public engagement, feasibility, and data analysis. So this opportunity to work with the Housing Commission, like I had mentioned earlier, prioritized 4th Ave as one of those people-friendly streets projects. So we actually estimate that the project will cost about 2.6. Let me make sure I have two different numbers in my head. Yeah, it's 2.6 for 4th Ave, and that will come through our TIF, and it will be, included in our CIP, and yeah, we won't be bonding or anything for it.
Thank you, Maura. I guess real quickly, there's no proposed plans to have any on-site parking, including for P2.
Currently, not anticipating requiring it as per the zoning. There is an option. There, of course, is always an option to include parking, and as this council knows, the easiest way to do that would be to expand access from the library lane garage, because there isn't way to get ramping to this site independently. So the analysis that we ran was it was quite a cost burden to require parking, and perhaps not the right thing to do, considering the quantity of parking adjacent, and hopeful commitment from DDA to allow for residents to park in either one of the decks.
That will not be an issue when it comes to financing, since that part of the development is mostly market rate. It seems to maybe be a concern if for the ownership to be able to finance this with parking or no parking.
The outreach, Jennifer, you can chime in if you like. The outreach that we've done to date is that not requiring it, but allowing for it to be an option is probably the best way to go at this point. Jennifer, you're on mute.
Yeah, I think
We focus it, sorry. There are quite a few developers that do market rate housing believe that they will, generally the sense is they would want maybe 20% of parking availability on the market rate side. But we didn't want to prescribe that or require that, because really our goal is to find a developer who shares the same values and has the same goals for the site that we do. And so we're going to approach it from that way, and that can change who our development partner is and what they want to build.
And will one be constructed before the other, or will these be constructed simultaneously? And in the staging of the construction, will it close any streets down because we were working in such a tight area?
Yeah, it could be built together, and it could be built in phases. That also adds flexibility. The way we underwrote it, just to make sure it was feasible, was a 9% tax credit deal on phase 1 and a 4% tax credit deal on phase 2. And those have to be standalone, financially feasible on their own, but it doesn't preclude them from being constructed at the same time, and it doesn't require them either. So it's really going to depend on who our partner is and what makes the most sense. And I'll let Michael answer the street closing.
We just haven't gotten into that level of detail yet. It is a constrained site, but because of the kind of L-shaped building, and some of the advancements in the construction technology that we're seeing these days, there at least is an option to stage this completely on site and, limit the amount of closures that you have to do. But that would certainly be something that will have to come in more detailed conversations with developers and contractors.
And then just one final question. I apologize for the length of time, but how much of our annual millage, what percentage of the revenue that we're speaking of? There's 20 years, only 20 years, $130 million. What percentage of all that can we comfortably say that we're going to be committing towards for this one particular project? Because we know we have several that we are looking at.
Right now we have $5 million in the budget, which could increase in a second year, but right now we have $5 million allocated.
And that somebody's done the financials, and
Yeah, that's with Mark Norman is working with us with the underwriting of conservatively feasible project of could we get the financing for this type of project. Everything's constantly fluctuating in the marketplace. As people know, there's supply chain issues, costs are going up, things like that. So, today we can't definitively say this is exactly the dollar amount, but based on our conservative underwriting of if the project was built today, which it won't be, it'll be in a couple of years, we can make that work. And I think it definitely could increase. And it also depends on where we end up on the ownership of the land. Our intent is to do a ground lease with the private side picking up the bulk of the ground lease cost, but it could be that the city needs funding to pay cash to pay off the debt. And so that may be an option as well. So that's options that we could do, either one of those.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Solomon Nelson.
So for the second floor, are there plans for there to be commercial space for that? And if not, or commercial office space? And then my second question is, would there be a possibility of having, say, our nonprofits who work with us, like Avalon, being able to be on site to work directly with low-income residents?
We have built in sort of service space, what you might be thinking of as office, because it is offices for services. I don't believe, Michael, we built it in as it's flexible. It could have like general office spaces rented, but not on the phase one. Potentially, if a developer wants to do that on phase two and that makes their financing work, that's a possibility, I believe.
Yep.
Councilor Nelson.
I was intrigued by the stat early on about commuting in and out, that I didn't realize that 45% of city residents actually commute out. I had been curious about what that number would be. Do we take anything from that data when we try to understand what parking needs are? I mean, this is a curiosity that I have about, housing that's directed at students. I've had conversations with Mike Rain about, how do we understand what the need actually is? I'm just curious, like, are you looking at that at all?
I guess I don't know what specifically
So
you're asking, but
did I hear you say earlier that for the market rate you were contemplating that maybe like 20% of the housing would have any sort of parking needs, or?
Oh, I see what you're saying. That's what we were hearing from private developers, ones that do this kind of development in other locations, but weren't necessarily going to be bidding on the project, just to try to get a sense. And that was their sense in a urban area that probably about 20% would want parking. But I would definitely believe that whatever developer we end up partnering with, that they're going to do a fresh new analysis of that before they finalize what they want to do. 100%.
Okay.
We do have, I think we have a slide in here about the housing needs assessment that we did about what the demand is for various income levels. I think we have a slide in there later on about that as well.
Yes.
Yeah, my thought was mostly around market rate, because I do see this as such an accessible location or accessible to really any part of the city just because of the bus station. Thank
Right.
you.
Yep.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on.
Okay, I'm gonna just keep rolling through the.
I'm sorry, just so I can time manage. How much more do we have? Because there'll probably be questions on this, and I want to make sure we get to this.
There are about 25 slides. I can go through them really fast. These are slides that were in the council packet in April, and it would just I could just verbal through them if everyone has time.
I'm keen to hear staff's presentation. I just partially just to make sure that we calibrate our questions, and then so that we can then understand that we have enough time for the next one.
Yep. I'll try to do
So-
this in
so
about 10 or
as you
15
will.
minutes, please.
Thank you.
So this is just a slide quickly to put those two sites, the site at 350 South 5th and the site at 415 West Washington that we've talked to council before in the context of the 4 additional sites that we've run public engagement through beginning in fall 2020 and through the current time. So a series of sites. A brief overview on the additional engagement. So when I referenced the 350 plus individuals that participated in the 350 South 5th and 415 West Washington engagement, we have had an additional 650 survey responses, 16 additional stakeholder meetings, and 3 engagement sessions, all done virtually through COVID, in addition to the 6,000 mailers that we sent out for individuals living within 1,000 feet of the 4 sites that we'll talk about here. And we spent, as Jennifer alluded to earlier, spent a lot of time ensuring that we were targeting individuals that don't often participate in these kinds of conversations. And particularly that often means individuals that don't live in our communities currently, but that would like to live in the community if there were opportunities to do so. And so we were tracking the engagement through different questions that we were asking, how proximity that individuals live to certain sites, age, of course, race and ethnicity, and then comparing that to our census data, and then also whether individuals currently rent or own their homes, and also comparing that back to data. We didn't quite get to the level, kind of a statistically significant number, but we were trying really hard to get to those numbers, as you can kind of see through some of these numbers. So Jennifer also alluded to the outside group BOA National Research that did run a parallel housing needs assessment for downtown. The kind of high level takeaways, and I think you all have been provided the full document here if you're interested in the several hundred page read. But the 1-page takeaway, demand for 1,300 to 1,400 units in downtown for less than 30% AMI, the 700 to 850 units at 30 to 60, and then the units from 60 to 100. But the key here is that market is going to continue to drive growth for higher income households in our downtown. And, I think further emphasizing the need for the city to take an active role in subsidizing and closing the gap to continue to build mixed income and affordable downtown. And then it also reinforced that these 7 sites are marketable for affordable residential development, and then specifically these 4 sites that we'll talk about. So I will go through this at a rather quick pace, and then please ask questions at the end. 121 East Catherine was the first site. We did ask individuals in those various formats of engagement some of the objectives that they preferred, and you can see how those ranked: maximizing affordable housing at the top, activating the ground floor for public benefit, mix of housing use and types, number 3, and then parking on site actually kind of ranked lower in this criteria. We did then also allow the public to kind of rank a series of options, all within the D2 zoning, and clear preference for the two options, which were a 5-story and a 6-story option, one yielding 70 to 80 units, and one yielding 85 to 95 units. I think there was a clear preference that the building design, however it plays out in either of those scenarios, should make sure that it is deferential to some of the adjacent buildings in scale. We also asked the public about then what might that mean on the ground plane, regardless of a 4, 5, or 6-story building. And there was so the 3 options that we looked at were maximizing the amount of surface parking on that site, and essentially a building that kind of landed on the ground with an active front, hiding parking with a lobby and the stair corridors, an option in the middle that kind of preserved about half of the parking, surface parking spaces on site here at the corner of 4th and Catherine, but then had a more intentional and robust active use facing 4th. And then a third option, which kind of had some underground parking and then active retail along kind of all 4 sides. The cost was pretty prohibitive for that third option, and we were pretty clear on that. But the public, there was a clear preference for both maximizing the amount of parking and still providing ways to activate that. So you can see our kind of bracketed preference here between options 1 and 2. And so this was a continuation. The council, this group here had already approved the development of 121 East Catherine for affordable housing, supported by the resolutions in 2019. And so, this kind of further reaffirmed the work here to pursue a development up to the 400% FAR, which yields about a 5 to 6 story building, maximizes the street level parking, but still creating and reinforcing an active ground floor at that corner. And so next steps would be the Housing Commission hiring a development team and moving forward with the site plan approval process, similar to what we just presented for the 350 South 5th. Emphasis here that housing above parking is common practice and doesn't have to be the image that several associate with, that's shown on the left, but actually can be done in a way that that actually reinforces the quality of space that we're looking for here in the old 4th Ward in Carytown. Maura, do you anything you'd like to add here on the?
Sure, I'll try to go fast. I'll just chime in on a few things on this. So for parking considerations on this lot, I think it's really important to point out that with the options that the Housing Commission is looking at, on average, it'll probably eliminate about half of the 49 spaces that are currently in that lot. And that makes up about 2% of the off-street and metered on-street spaces in the neighborhood. So although these are really convenient spaces, I just think it's really important to point out that there is ample parking in this neighborhood, particularly on farmers market Saturdays and in the evenings when the Ian Ashley structure has plenty of capacity, especially now. There'll definitely be challenges during construction, and we can definitely draw upon our experience and the lessons we learned while we were underway with the 5th and Detroit construction project. One of the biggest challenges that we found, and I think this is something we can work towards solving, is just this disconnection between the neighborhood and the Ian Ashley structure. For people without any mobility issues, it's literally a block and a half, away. It's just a real short walk. So we're committed to working with the Housing Commission, the Carytown neighborhood, and our colleagues at the farmers market during the construction process to do what we can, to mitigate the impacts on parking through wayfinding maps, and other creative solutions. And so our role in this project, which will begin next spring of 2022, we were able to prioritize this project in our next round of people-friendly streets projects. So we are going to get in there ahead of the Housing Commission, and we are going to upsize and extend a water main to support the project. And we'll also expand the protected bikeway network by installing a 2-way protected bike lane on the south side of Miller Catherine from Division to Chapin. And that's on the opposite side from where we had the pilot. If you recall, we had the pilot on the north side. We learned a lot of lessons, and we recognized that the south side is a better spot for it. And with this bike lane, just to point out that it'll also contribute to the city's 2025 Vision Zero goal, as this street was identified as one of the Tier 1 focus corridors in the Transportation Master Plan. So we plan on getting in there, doing that water main work, the protected bike lane, and then coming back in after the Housing Commission does their work to do alley restoration and some streetscape restoration. Hope that was fast enough.
Thanks, Maura. That was great. Mayor Taylor, I see Councilmember Hayner's hand up. Do you want me to wait till the end, or do you want to take questions?
I guess let's roll with questions along the way.
Okay.
Councilmember Hayner?
Thanks. So, I'll save a general question till the end about the, the potential that we need to revisit D1, D2 to incentivize market responses to our actual needs. When you say that the market is not working towards us, they're working against us by creating only market value or above market value, high end type housing, because that's what's most profitable. I wonder if we shouldn't reconsider our incentives in D1, D2, because supply side's working against us right now. So why, when we looked at that specifically to the Catherine Fourth project, why is it the parking out on the corner? Why is it the parking out on the corner near to continue to have the potential to facilitate the public plaza like has been used for so many years there, where they shut it down for various events, African American Festival, Pride Fest, and so on? How come the parking's tucked behind instead of out on the corner? I know that there's this kind of general notion of, activating the sidewalks by having businesses right up against the sidewalk, but that also has a tendency to create this kind of a alley or canyon type effect. And I'm not sure that it's working for us as a community. And so I'm just wondering how it was that the parking came to be stuffed in the back instead of opening up along the street and creating these vistas and views and things that are kind of, to me at least, indicative of a more healthy environment, a safe environment.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think there's a couple of thoughts there. And I will emphasize that, none of this has been designed yet. And so a lot of the details are things that will need to, be designed moving forward. But much of the consideration was, that corner at 4th and Catherine really being an opportunity to be kind of a better gateway into the farmers market area as part of Carytown and the old 4th Ward. A corner also is not a good place for maximizing parking spaces. So it became kind of a logical space where the lobby does have to touch the ground somewhere. So that could be a place to do that. But as you alluded to, there's a lot of discussion that has to happen about then the best way to announce kind of where parking is and how to access that parking, both either from the alley and or from 4th as the building design moving forward. And then what is that experience walking along 4th as well, and what happens, right? Is there actually active programming? Or is it some sort of kind of we've talked about cultural space or museum kind of space that could in many ways memorialize and activate what that space, what that area was and has been in our community as well. So I appreciate the question, and more to come.
Since we paused for a second on this one, I guess I'd like to say that for my part, I appreciate that people do, some folks do value the parking that's there, but I do understand that it is a small portion of the parking in the area. And, I heard maximize parking a number of times in the course of the presentation. I know that we're doing what we can to maximize units, and I'm behind that. Particularly at a site like this, I'd rather maximize, or rather secondarize after units, street activity, street engagement, activity at the level, at grade, rather than, parking at grade residential at top. I don't want, I'd be more interested in less parking, more, street facing activity at grade. My 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you. We certainly, and several of you participated in many of the engagement sessions. It's as you all know, very polarizing, and we've heard opposite extremes on both ends. Although I do say, and we'll emphasize, and Jennifer can as well, the way that we've continued to bracket this that we present to you today, I think has started to find a common ground and a compromise that I think, at least I'm hopeful, is a place to build from moving forward, that at least our community is willing to kind of continue to move forward.
Fair point. 353.
So the 353 South Main Street, affectionately known as the Paleo lot, same questions that were asked. Again, the survey respondents focused on affordable housing on this site, activating the ground floor even higher here, ensuring that it contributes to the Main Street character. And you can see parking on site is pretty low here. We did look at two options. This is zoned D1. And so we cannot get to the height requirements of D1 here because you max out FAR before you get anywhere close to a taller building. So a 900% FAR building on this small site is a 9 or 10 story building. And so we've bracketed two options, frankly, just as it relates to giving some space here for a future partner as it relates to construction costs. Once we go above a 5 or 6 story building, this would trigger high rise construction, steel frame, concrete, all of the above, and fire code that's high rise. So so there are two options here: one that yields 90 units and one that would yield 50. Both this site and the previous site are perfect scale, as Jennifer alluded to, for all affordable projects, 9% LIHTC deals. So as you approved on April 19th, moving forward with the development of this site for affordable housing up to 900% and 10 stories, Housing Commission as a developer, and continuing to move forward on the next steps on this site, similar to the 121 East Catherine site. 721 is the next site. Any questions on the previous before I move on? Trying to keep you all on schedule. So for 721, that North Main, of course, a much studied site in our city. The focus of our effort has been on a small portion of the 721 site, which we're currently affectionately calling 123 West Summit. So it's the area of the site that is out of the floodplain, floodway, and fronts on Summit Street because of previous FEMA grants received from the city would restrict the kind of development that we'd be looking to do in the floodway. And so some of the objectives we heard from our residents, again, maximizing affordable housing, engaging the tree line trail rising to the top here, a mix of unit housing and prices, and then you can see some of the other considerations. We looked at a couple of options that were within character of kind of the adjacent C1 zoning in this area, and the preference was around a mid-rise apartment building that yielded approximately 19 units and fronted on Summit Street. And so on the 19th, you approved the first step in that, which would be to divide the property between the floodplain kind of lower land parcel with this 14,520 square foot parcel facing Summit Street, and designating the Housing Commission as a developer that would target a 3-story development with walk-up units along Summit. And then the final site that we'll talk about is 309 South Ashley, the Klein lot. You can see how our neighbors and residents ranked some of their preferences from an objective standpoint. Affordable housing for 60% AMI households at the top, ground floor public benefit, mix of housing, parking ranked higher on this site, and then maximize market rate residential, the lowest rank. For this site, we acknowledged that it was a little bit different than the other sites, and kept it on kind of pace with the other sites that we looked at, because I think it was important to have, and we thought it was important to have this conversation on this site in conjunction with the other sites. But so we looked at an option that essentially kind of maximized D1 floor area ratio in this scenario, built on top of a parking garage, and then maybe a lower rise option that was built on top of a parking garage, and the public preferred the higher rise option. Similarly, we looked at an option of kind of separating that parcel into 2 or 3 parcels, which could include either smaller parking garage or off-site parking, and and the public, preferred that kind of higher rise option for that. But it became clear that there was a conversation that we probably needed to have as a community, not in the context of a more biased look at affordable housing, and it was more around what this lot might need and what our downtown may need from a parking standpoint prior to jumping directly into specifically a housing focused conversation. And so the recommendation here is to just continue those discussions with the DDA and the downtown businesses about what the long-term solutions as related to development might mean, and how we might think about kind of how this site contributes to those multiple goals that we are looking for as a community. So here's a summary slide, and I think that's all I have. Questions?
Any further questions? We've got Briggs and Mermlawi. If both could be quick, please, because we have another presentation.
Going back to the Catherine site, I was just curious, in terms of partnerships, has there been any discussion with the county and maybe their future plans regarding sort of the parking lot across the way and what they're thinking about there? And then because this is sort of an iconic area of town, how much design is design being considered in this project?
I can answer the question about conversation with the county. We have had conversations in the last couple of years about county-owned sites, future development, affordable housing, partnering, and they're thinking about it. They're just not at the same place timing wise in making a serious move forward on doing that. And so we decided that we would go ahead and move forward because that's a project that right now, the way that tax credit financing is and the way it scores, it's like one of the highest scoring sites. So I don't want to give up an opportunity for us to do something on our site, to wait for a future partnership. We did do a parking study to see what it would cost to do a underground parking for both under the county site as well as the city site. And it was, I don't remember the amount, $130,000 of parking space, I think, was one of the things we also looked at.
And quickly from a design perspective, I would say that both this site and the 353 South Main site are two iconic kind of gateways into different areas of our town. And while design is and should always be on our forefront, this should receive the extra scrutiny that it has already received and should continue to. We're not there yet, but I look forward to those kind of next steps.
Dr. Rahman?
Thank you. Yeah, just with cadence, how often we're going to be able to get these type of updates on these projects and feedback. What are we looking at in terms of cadence?
I mean, we can do every year, twice a year, whatever you want us to do. We can give you updates. We can give you verbal. So you have a opportunity to ask questions. We can give you written, like in April, we provided a written report. And then we heard from a couple of council members that they would like to have an opportunity like this at a work session. So really we can do as much as you want us to do. We do have to come back multiple times to planning commission, city council for, zoning and site plan and, when we get to RFP processes. So we will be coming back for specific sites. We can also update you on other sites every time we do that. That's not a problem.
Yeah, I think I was going to touch on what Jen said. I think as this moves, especially the sites move into the entitlement process, you're going to see them on a semi-regular basis for approval, not just for updates. But I think all of council is aware that all of the things we're talking about here as these move forward in entitlement require planning commission and city council approval at different stages. That is the area we're moving into now, especially with the sites that are more up in front.
Thank you.
Excellent. Ms. Hall et al. Thank you so very much. This is a lot of great work, and it's exactly the sort of momentum that we need to meet our affordable housing goals. So, one and all, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Suchuk, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Okay, one second. Let me bring my presentation up. Jackie, am I a panelist or an attendee?
I just gave you a co-host, so you should have permission to screen share.
All right. Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Can everybody see that?
You bet.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. All right. Well, hello, everyone. It's good to see everybody. So what I want to talk about is a smart city strategy. And first of all, I wanted to start off with, what a smart city is. And, my definition of it is really in quotes there. And a smart city utilizes modern technology and a collection of data to maximize operational efficiency, reduce costs, and enhance how we serve our community. So the key things being, modern technology has come a long way. It allows us to do a lot more that we couldn't do in the past. And in addition to that, collecting data from the assets out in the field really help us run the business a lot better and a lot more efficient. One thing you will find when you go out and you look at other smart cities, you'll see a lot of different definitions of it. So everybody will have their own version of it. A lot of the components are the same, but all cities are unique. And the smart city solutions that I talk about today, we may or may never use them. Okay, I'm going to give you some examples of some really neat technologies. But the stuff that I talk about today, I'll talk about the stuff that we've already been doing and some of the stuff that we'll be doing in the future. But some of the things I'll just give as an examples of things that are possible, but not necessarily. It doesn't necessarily mean that we will ever deploy them either. And the smart city strategy and all the work that we've done with our communications network and all of our systems in IT, all the stuff in the data center that you never see that's behind locked doors. What it really does, it makes these things possible for the future. It removes barriers so we can do things to help the community. So when it comes to smart cities, there are certain core elements that I feel are needed to have a really comprehensive solution. The first one are things. So you've heard of IoT, and IoT, the T in IoT are things. And these are sensors or devices that are attached to a network. It could be a street light head, a smart street light head. It could be a smart parking meter. It could be a trash or recycling bin. It could be anything where you can put a device or a sensor on. And then what you do is you take those devices, and just like a computer, how they're connected to a network, you would connect it to a network, either a fiber network or a wired network or a wireless network. And that allows us to communicate with those devices. That allows us to look at the health of them, and it allows us to push data back and forth between them. And then what happens is data storage comes in. We save a lot of data in the city. We have a lot of data in the city, but as we put these devices out in the field, they continue to collect data, and we will continue to store that data. And then There's software that actually controls the devices that allow you to manage the device. It allows you to change the devices, look at the health of the device, see if it's working, see if it's not working. And then it provides metrics and dashboards about the devices out there, how much energy they're using, whether they're broken, whether they're failing. So the software is really key. And then artificial intelligence and machine learning is really prevalent in the IoT space these days, where it really takes the human elements out of watching these devices and allows artificial intelligence to take over and make decisions. And then the last thing is the IoT management platform will push and pull data from these devices that are out in the field. And then the last piece, which is really, really important, is our business intelligence platform, or our big data platform. You've probably heard me talk about that before. But what that does is that allows us, we have a data lake that we create where we put this information in, and it allows us to do advanced analytics, from a central location, and it allows us to deliver that information back to our business units so they can make good decisions about their operations. And if anybody has any questions, just feel free to chime in, and I'm going to throw a lot of stuff at you. So when it comes to a smart city, these five elements are absolutely critical in order to have a comprehensive solution. So what does a smart city look like? So in the picture here, we have downtown Ann Arbor. We have a couple of large circles. One would be our data center. The other one would be our communications network. And then all around the edges, what you have is all these sensors, all these devices. You have, your smart buildings, smart environmental sensors, smart traffic lights, smart homes. All of these types of things, they'll communicate with the network, and it will store the data in the data center and allow us to communicate with all of these devices that are out in the field. Now, the important thing is, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but there are thousands and thousands of use cases. So I'm going to talk, when I say use cases, it's going to be, environmental sensors would be one use case. Smart street lighting would be another. Parking would be another. So it's just different. It's different sensors doing different things in the city that are connected to a network that allow us to communicate with them and capture data and control them. So, so now today there's about 35 billion devices out in the field. And by 2025, there's going to be about 75 billion of these, worldwide. So thousands and thousands of these things will be out in the, what I call the wild, and technology and what they have done with technology allows us to put these devices virtually on every single asset that we have in the city. It could be a vehicle, it could be a kayak or a canoe, it could be a building, it could be street light, anything that allows you to do this. All right, so what I want to do is I want to take you through an example of using all of the elements with a street light. But if you take all of those use cases, you can really apply this concept to just about anything that we put out in the field. So if you take your traditional street light, really street lights in the past, they really weren't very intelligent. You ran power to them, they lit up, and they had a photocell in them, and they turned on at night, they turned off in the morning. And that was about the extent of it. So what we do is now, what we can do is we can put a smart head on the street light and put a sensor on it, and then we can connect it to the network. So what that allows us to do, it allows us to see it. It allows us to know if it's on, if it's off. It allows us to turn it on or off. We could dim it. We could do all sorts of things with it. And then what we do is all of that information is then sent to our data center. So we continue to capture this information about this asset that's out in the field. And then what happens, then this is where the software comes in. And the software allows us to understand how much energy the light is using. It allows us to understand whether the LED may be degrading and it might be going bad. It allows us to turn it on and off. It allows us to dim it, control it. And then if something goes wrong with it, the good thing about it is it can push data, it can pull data, and it can push data. It can email me, it can text me, it can notify me as soon as that light goes bad or something goes wrong with it. So, and then all of the data that's collected from that device. And today we have about 75 of these smart heads out there on streetlights, but all of that data that's collected from that, it's all stored in our data lake. And all the information about that asset, all the history of it, like, you know, when it turned on, when it turned off, whether it was dimmed at the time of an incident that was out in the field, all of that information is captured, and then it can be reported on and sent back to the business unit. So what you can do is by connecting this device and understanding its status, you can determine whether it breaks. And if it breaks, what you could do, say we have, you know, 75 lights, say 3 lights go out every night. If those lights go out, you can actually write software to say, you know, when the signs and signals people come in the morning, you know, we're going to have you go fix all the broken lights, and could already have a route and scheduled for you and everything based on the information I got from those devices. So does that make sense? So it's pretty automated, and basically it just allows you to connect to something and understand it and monitor it, and you can do it anywhere you have an internet connection. I could do it from my phone here. You could be halfway across the world, and you would be able to control that light and do anything that you wanted with it. So that's the glory of connecting all of these devices out in the field. That just gives you an insight into them. So what happens today if a street light goes bad? Either the signs and signals people, they're driving by it and they notice that it's bad, or a citizen will have to call it in or put an A2 fix-it order in. So if you think of it that way, either you're burning resources, hopping in a car, taking time to go through the route, or a citizen is being inconvenienced and they have to put something in the system. Then customer service gets it. Then a ticket goes into CityWorks. So you can see if we know that device is defective and we can fix it before any of that happens, what it does, how much time and how efficient it is when nobody would even know that it was out. So does that make sense? Okay. So there's some other use cases, just to kind of give you an idea that I want to talk about. Things like environmental sensors, we can put them out in the field and we can know how much it can report on CO2 emissions, temperature, pollution, toxic gases, things like that. EV chargers, you know, we can hook those to the network as well, and we can monitor them. So if, you know, we can monitor the usage of them, how much they're being used, whether we need more or whether we need to move them to different areas of the city. Building automation systems. This, you know, the presentation with housing was great because, you know, I was aware of a couple of those sites that, you know, we're potentially building, but putting, there's new technology that can go into buildings. That's 50% of the cost of old wiring that goes in buildings. And we should be, we should be automating those buildings. We should be, you know, wiring every single room in those buildings for things like aging in place, telemedicine, you know, people not having to get up and go to the doctor when they can report their blood sugar levels to a doctor, you know, over the internet, you know, applications like that, energy usage in the building. You know, if we're building a building, we should know everything about the energy usage in that building, and we should help our tenants, you know, manage their energy and, you know, and manage cost. So some of our older buildings, it's kind of difficult to do that. And we have connectivity to all of our housing buildings. But as these new buildings are built, we need to put very, very advanced building automation systems in there that will give us all of that information. And we should have a clear view of what's going on in the building at any time of the day. Other things like snow sensors, you can put them out in the field when it snows. If you get a bunch of snow on one end of the town and little snow on the other end of the town, you already know where the snow is at, so then you can adjust your routes accordingly to go out and take care of the snow. And then we have a huge connected vehicle presence. You know, the University of Michigan Transportation Research Institute has one of the most advanced connected vehicle labs and research in the world, and that's all runs on our current network. And we are putting more infrastructure in the ground to be able to accommodate these mobility corridors so they can study traffic patterns and they can study energy usage and pedestrian traffic and all kinds of stuff. But the good thing, so when it comes to the mobility, now today, if a vehicle is going through the city, what they can do is they can talk to another vehicle if they have the proper equipment in it, or they get to an intersection and they upload their data at the intersection, and that goes to the U of M Research Institute. Well, wouldn't it be nice if we had a really, really fast network where it could upload that information and you could get it back in real time? So you're a pedestrian and you're walking down the street and you have your head down in your phone and you're walking towards an intersection. If one of those connected vehicles are coming down the street, if they can get information to your phone quickly to say, hey, I'm coming down the street, please get your head out of your phone. That's the types of things you can do with this technology by moving data very, very quickly through the networks and being able to tell people, hey, you're going to get hit by a car. So all of that stuff exists and all of that stuff is possible with this technology. And then the last thing I want to talk about is this distributed acoustic vibration sensing technology, DAS. Really, really cool technology. Spark ended up setting up a meeting to talk to these folks, but British Petroleum bought this company and the technology that goes along with it to monitor all of their pipelines for leaks. And what they do is they actually use fiber optics to sense vibrations in the ground. So if you have a vehicle going over the ground, they can tell you if it's a compact car, they can tell you if it's a truck, they can tell you if it's a bicycle, and it can report that data. And so a vehicle of a certain type is coming into the city. Well, say you have a big truck coming into the city that's really spewing a lot of carbon emissions, and you really want to get that truck through the city very, very quickly. This technology can actually sense that truck's coming in, sense where it's at on the road. It could communicate with the traffic control system, and it could get that vehicle through the city very, very quickly so it spews less emissions out to everybody. So those are just a couple examples of that stuff is really cool. Now, whether we ever implemented that here in Ann Arbor, I don't know that we would, but it's just really, really cool what you can do with this technology. So the point is on this slide, and the model to the left is really if you're going to put a smart city solution in, you want to do it comprehensively, and that is that you make sure that you use all the elements that I talked about before. And then what we do is in the IT department, we have a project delivery methodology that we use to make sure that we capture really, really good requirements for the project. What problem are you trying to solve? What are your needs? What are your requirements? What is the current environment? And we do that to make sure that we reduce risk and increase the success of a project and making sure that we're meeting the needs of a department or whoever wants to solve a problem. And we use this model and we run it through this model every time to make sure that we capture that stuff. But the other reasons we do it is to make sure that we're including things that sometimes get missed. What about if we're putting a solution in diversity, equity, inclusion? Is that all that stuff being considered? Is that being included? Is somebody taking that into consideration for this project? Security and privacy and transparency needs. All of that stuff needs to be considered anytime we do anything from a technology standpoint. But we don't lead with technology. We lead with the business needs, and then we apply the technology to the business needs afterwards. But we make sure that those components are included in this, they're tended to in the solution. And then what we should be doing is if we can connect things to the network, we want to capture the data so we can monitor it, we can understand the assets, and then it'll give us an opportunity to analyze it. So you'll notice in this model here, we have the Plan, Do, Study, Act over to the right, and that is basically, putting a solution in place, capturing data to understand how the system works, and then studying the data, and then acting upon it, making changes, but then you keep doing it. So the project really never stops. It's a continuous improvement model where, you put something in, you study the data, you see how it works, you make changes, you study, and you do it all over again. So To me, this is really, really important when we implement something in the city. All right, so what I want to talk about here is really our approach. So I talked about no two cities are the same. So our approach is very holistic and community focused. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the stuff that we're doing later. But when we think about the solutions we're putting in, like our fiber infrastructure and our technologies, we want to make sure we're doing it for the community, and we're trying to make it all inclusive for everybody. We're not just doing it for a department. We're not just doing it for the city. We're doing it for a lot of other people at the same time because it makes sense. So there's, this system is very complex. There's many stakeholders involved in smart cities. There's a lot of moving parts to it to organize and maintain. So the other thing we have to make sure is that aligns with all of our organizational strategies, like our A20 climate plan, our One Community Initiative, Vision Zero. We have to know what the other departments are doing to make sure that everything is complying with that, and make sure that it aligns with those strategies as well. Because we don't want to go breaking something and going off in a different route that somebody else planned that wanted to go a different way. So, the strategic plan is customized for the Ann Arbor community. Again, I talked about the art of possible earlier. And then it must cater to a hybrid infrastructure. So in Ann Arbor, a lot of my peers around the country in different cities, like I said, every city is different. Some cities own everything. They own their electricity. They don't own and deliver their electricity, their water, their transit, their parking. In Ann Arbor, we own a little bit here, and we own we control some things and we don't control other things. So what that means is we have to collaborate with other entities to make sure that when we go and we do something, is that we're not stepping on each other's toes. So that presents a little bit of a challenge here, but it is what it is. I'm just realistic about where we're at. And then, so I'm not here to ask for a big capital spend. All right. A lot of the components that I talked about earlier have been put in place over the years and in conjunction with other projects that we've been doing. What this strategy is for is that as we have opportunities that come up, so if Raymond wants to put more street light heads in, or Molly wants to put more recycle bins in, or snow sensors, or Brian wants to put water flow sensors in the river, we have the foundation to make all of that stuff possible. And that's really what the goal is that we have a very, very good foundation to make all that possible. There's very little barriers stopping them from actually accomplishing it and doing it. So, I already talked about, it's very important that the systems that we build are sustainable. It's very important they're built for the long term, for the future, because if people don't trust the network, they're not going to want to use the network. And so we have to make sure that everything that we do, has a plan. It's been architected, very carefully, and it's really designed to last. In some of the projects, especially when we go to open up the streets, they are really designed to last decades, so we don't have to open up the streets again. And there's nothing more frustrating than somebody doing a project and they're opening up a street and we don't know about it when we had an opportunity to go put something underground. So, we're not looking to do vanity projects, and we're not looking to do stuff just because it's cool. We're looking to solve problems, and we're looking to put solutions in that add real value. And then I'm sorry, our dig once strategy is very important. We only want to open up the ground once. And again, it needs to be scalable and sustainable. So what we have built so far and what we're going to build just keeps building upon itself and getting larger and larger and able to accommodate more people. So this is a picture it doesn't look like much, but I didn't put all the detail in it because we really don't share our fiber maps with, we don't share our detailed fiber maps with anybody for security reasons. But what you see here is all of the fiber and all the conduit we have going throughout the city. This is the main fiber and communications network that allows all the smart city stuff to happen. And you'll notice that it's pretty, it pretty much covers the whole city. In the downtown area, we in the DDA district, we have a project coming up over the next year and a half that will put more fiber and conduit in the downtown area. And fiber and conduit, especially going through those new housing sites. We will make sure that we plan to get, when we do this project, we will make sure that we plan fiber and conduit at the footstep of that building to make sure that we can get communications into it early. And then in 2017, we built our first network that connects all of our buildings together. Our first city network. There's a network that controls all of the traffic control systems, and then we're also planning on doing a project. We're waiting for some funding from the EDA to be able to connect the Ann Arbor Smart Zone to the IPSI Smart Zone and putting a mobility corridor down Washtenaw and back up Packard and getting back to Ann Arbor. So am I running out of time? How much longer do I have? Okay. All right. So I'll just go through really quickly with this. We did some sessions with internal stakeholders within the city, in the community, and then we did some a couple engagement sessions with the community, and came up with the goals that you see here, and they're also in the plan. And these are the objectives that we're going to address. So for we want to be the most desirable city to live, work, and play. We want to make sure we enhance our city services with smart city technologies. We want to make sure that we improve our transportation and mobility. We're building the technology park in the DDA district. We want to promote affordable housing. We want to make sure we're using these technologies in our affordable housing buildings, and all of our affordable housing sites today are connected to our network, and they will continue to be. We want to bridge the digital divide. We want to make sure that internet is available to everybody. So, distance learning and access is really important to affordable internet. And economic development. We want to make sure that we not only attract new people and new businesses, but we also want to make sure that we retain them. We don't want students leaving. We want them to stay here. We don't want businesses leaving. We want them to stay here in the city. And next one is improved quality of life, having a safe community, working with safety services, getting them the technology to keep us safe, healthy and environmental friendly community, working with OSI on environmental issues, and making sure things are equitable and inclusive. And then this one is just basically disciplined telecommunication strategies built for the long run, making sure that we get to a data-driven culture, capture the data, use it effectively across the organization, and then building strong community relationships, making sure everybody knows what's going on, making sure they have access to it, and we really want to use the assets as we put them in. And I'm going to kind of leave it at that. And the last slide, keys to success: building community trust, build and maintain a quality, sustainable, and scalable smart city ecosystem. It's just going to continue to grow and grow. Take a systematic approach towards how we do it. Proactive and effective communications with the community. Breaking down silos is a big one. We still have silos in the city we need to take care of. And then, and we want fiber to be treated as critical infrastructure. I don't think it gets the attention that it needs. But if you take your internet access away, you take that away, you won't like it. So I think we need it as a critical infrastructure, and it needs to stay up and running. So. And then utilization of data again, and the data sciences is really. Sorry, I went a little faster than I had to.
Thank you so much. We've got at least one question, Councilmember Griswold.
Yes, thank you very much. I always enjoy these IT presentations. Another issue that I think is important and is achievable with the technology we have today is mean time between failure for streetlights. And so I would like to see that employed. Also, in terms of our equity goal, research has shown that if we can be proactive rather than complaint-based in terms of vegetation or streetlight outages, we're going to achieve our equity goal, because some people feel more comfortable interacting with their government and feel more empowered than other people do. So we really need to be proactive. And then the last question I have, and maybe you can give me an answer at a later time, with pedestrian crash data, close calls are very important, but there's no easy way to report that. And I don't know if there's any technology that would aid in that. So I'll let you think about that for a while.
Yeah, that one's a toughie. I'm sure it can be achieved, but that would be a toughie.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Going back to the streetlights, what's that?
Oh, I was going to go on to the next question.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was just going to address the streetlight issue. When I said we have a hybrid infrastructure in the city, the problem is that we don't own all our streetlights.
Yeah.
So we can only control what we own, and then we have to rely on other people to control the rest, or we have to obtain them. And if we can't control them, then it's kind of out of our hands. So, yeah.
I agree.
We got two questions in the queue. Are there a council member who has not asked a question yet today who wishes to opt in, because we are under time pressure? Seeing none, Councilmember Briggs and Ramlawi, then let's wrap it up. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Great to hear what's happening, and obviously smart cities are, there's just so much exciting work that's happening across the country, and it's all very inspiring. This is more of a comment than a question, or perhaps a caution for us a little bit. I think as we move towards employing sort of smart city technology and moving that way, you've alluded to it in terms of being community focused, enhancing community services, but one of the things that I'm not sure if we're doing as actively is really just kind of evaluating as we move towards new devices and technology, what are the things that we might be losing when we move away from sort of the old model. So for example, technology is really good at focusing in on one thing and doing that really well, and getting us much more information. But sometimes I think we also use it to justify eliminating jobs in our community. And sometimes those folks that are doing that work are doing many things. So the person that's going and checking, looking for streetlight outages may also be observing a number of other issues along the way. Or the person who is operating our parking kiosks may have also been giving directions to somebody in the community. And so I think as we think about enhancing our city services, part of that may be not using this ever necessarily to eliminate jobs, but thinking about how do those people get used differently in the future to actually enhance community services, and how do we do that? And obviously, we're probably going to need more data analysts as well.
Yeah, to me, I mean, I don't see it eliminating jobs. I see it doing jobs differently. But again, it all goes back to the requirements. What are we trying to achieve? And we always vet those through before we implement something to make sure that we're not, overstepping our bounds or doing something we shouldn't be doing. So that's part of that project delivery methodology that I talked about. It's making sure we really understand what the customer wants, which would be our departments, our customers being, city departments. And but again, I would say the majority of the time, it doesn't eliminate jobs. It just makes everybody's life a lot easier. So,
Councilmember Ramlawi.
Thank you.
Thank you. I guess it's just, more of a comment than a question, but perhaps you can elaborate on it with all the cyber attacks that we've been hearing about recently, the Colonial Pipeline, JBS, meatpacking, we're seeing more and more sophisticated attacks on technology that are affecting organizations, large organizations for ransom. If we go to this direction of becoming more and more dependent on technology, we become more and more vulnerable to these kind of attacks. What do you got to say to help ease the concern on that dependency, on that vulnerability?
Yeah, it's we're vulnerable every day, but it certainly exists. So I didn't get to the one slide where I talked about cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is, it's prevalent in everything we do today. It just gets worse and worse every day. But we've done some things to secure and done some things to make changes to make sure that if we do get compromised, and I'll say it again, we will get compromised. It's just a matter of how we are able to recover from being compromised. So the risk is there. The risk does increase as we put more.
I'm not hearing anything. I'm not sure if anyone else is.
No, I don't think so.
I think he was going to say the risk increases the more devices we have out there, but we do have plans and strategies that we try to do to mitigate that risk. It's a risk you can't get away from, but you can have plans to try to deal with. So.
Well, the concern is that we're going to become more and more dependent on this, and we'll put more and more into it, and so the cost and the consequence is that just that much greater. And I know we can't quantify or get to the solution now, but that is an ongoing concern.
But there are different kind of protocols you would consider for more critical items versus less critical, and so it's a rather sophisticated way to look at it. But your point is taken that is something we have.
Councilmember Song said you trying to wrap things up, but there's an off. You might well. What?
I'll make it fast.
By all means.
So we use two-factor authentication, right? I think with the Colonial hack, it was just one password, a single password that disrupted that.
We are in the process of rolling out two-factor. We don't use it universally now.
And then is there, would we consider doing open data policing like North Carolina, Maryland, and Illinois on traffic stops? Is that something that's probably more manageable at the county level?
I'd have to get back to you on that. I'm not actually familiar with it.
It's opendatapolicing.com. Okay, I'll search
the
that.
web, the web thing.
Yeah.
I did see that, and I have some inquiries to staff about that.
Okay,
I don't have an answer for tonight.
That's okay. Thank you. That's it.
All right. Well, Mr. Suchek, if you can hear us, thank you very much. There's a lot going on, and it's important that we, as residents ask us to do more, that we strive to do more, and we do so in an efficient manner, and that means, generally speaking, technology. So thank you for your work here. We now come to public comment general time. Public comment general time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment general time, one need not have signed up in advance. Speakers may dial a number on your screen, 877-853-5247. 877-853-5247. Once you're connected, please enter meeting ID 942-1273-2148. That is 942-1273-2148. Once you are connected, please enter *9 to indicate that you wish to speak. When it is your turn to speak, our clerk will identify you with the last 3 digits of your telephone number. When you are speaking, you will have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time. Our clerk will notify you when 30 seconds are remaining and when your time has expired. When your time has expired, please conclude your remarks and cede the floor. Is there anyone who'd like to speak at public comment?
I don't see anybody in the queue in public comment.
Have a motion to adjourn, please, move by. Councilmember Malawi, second by Councilmember Ryer. Discussion, all in favor? Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.